My name is Ella Garcia, and at 31 years old, the first time I noticed it, it felt almost insignificant. Nicholas had posted a photo with Mia, his ex-girlfriend, and I told myself it was nothing. Just nostalgia, just a memory. But something in the way he smiled at her in that picture, the casual intimacy of it, made my stomach tighten. We'd been together for 18 months, and I loved him, loved the way his laugh filled the kitchen, the warmth of his hand over mine on cold evenings. But scrolling past that Instagram post, I felt a cold, insistent whisper at the edge of my mind. Does he still care? I tried to brush it off. He was Nicholas, my Nicholas, and Mia had been a chapter that ended years ago. But the posts kept coming. Throwback photos of them at concerts, screenshots from vacations, captions that made me pause. Some things never change, miss this one. The world of likes and comments seemed to validate him, glorifying a closeness that, to me, felt like trespassing. I remember the first time I tried to speak up. We were drinking coffee on a Sunday morning, sunlight spilling across the living room. I picked up my phone, pretending to check the weather, my gaze fixed instead on the screen. "Hey," I said softly, sliding the phone toward him. "Can we talk about this post? It feels a little too close." He glanced at it once, then laughed. "Ella, come on. You're overthinking this. Your jealousy is your problem." My stomach sank. I blinked, searching his face for a trace of reassurance, but he was calm, almost amused. Jealousy? Was that what this was? That night, I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling. My fingers itched to reach for my journal. Slowly, I rolled onto my side, picked up my notebook, and began to write. It's not jealousy, it's respect. It's feeling like someone is crossing a line I didn't even know existed until I felt it. Is that too much to ask? The next week, the pattern emerged. Mia posted a story from a friend reunion, a coffee shop photo, the two of them leaning together, smiling. Nicholas tagged her with a heart emoji, and my chest tightened in a way that startled me. I had to walk away from my phone, leaning against the counter, the clinking of dishes a harsh backdrop to the whirlwind in my mind. I realized then that this wasn't occasional nostalgia. It was a pattern, a ritual of subtle affection, posted publicly, deliberately timed, when he knew I would see it. Each time, I told myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew. He's aware. He knows exactly how it looks. I tried to bring it up again, a little firmer this time, my voice shaking only slightly. "Nicholas, I need you to understand how this makes me feel. Posting this, it doesn't feel like just a memory. It feels like..." "Like what?" he interrupted smoothly, the faint smile still playing on his lips. "Like I'm some evil ex-obsessed boyfriend? Ella, your jealousy is exhausting. I won't be controlled by your emotions. It's your problem, not mine." I stared at him, stunned. The words didn't sting so much as confuse me. I had loved him with everything I had, and now, in the living room that had always felt safe, his calm dismissal made me feel suddenly adrift. Controlled by my emotions, I had simply expressed a feeling. It was legitimate, human, and yet he made it seem like a crime. That night, I opened my laptop after he'd gone to bed, the dim glow illuminating my furrowed brow. I clicked through Mia's profile, noting her life, a girlfriend, celebrations, photos tagged with people I didn't know. There were no posts hinting at the late-night dinners with Nicholas, no pictures of coffee dates that mirrored his stories. It was selective nostalgia, curated and calculated. I felt a flicker of clarity. This isn't just memory. This is a performance, and I'm the audience. The following days became a slow descent into a quiet tension. I found myself scrolling through Nicholas's phoneless moments on Instagram obsessively, noting times, captions, interactions. My mind looped through endless scenarios. Was it a test, a display, or just carelessness? I couldn't tell anymore. And yet, beneath the unease, there was something else, something raw and insistent. A voice inside me whispered, "Trust your instincts. This isn't just a post, it's a pattern, and you deserve to see the truth." I started documenting, screenshots, mental notes, dates, and times. Every post became a breadcrumb in a trail I didn't yet fully understand. Every flippant comment from Nicholas, "You're making a problem out of nothing," was a flicker of a truth I didn't want to face. Some nights I would lie awake, the city quiet beyond the windows, and whisper to myself, I need to protect my heart. If he won't respect me now, how can he ever? It was in those moments, alone with my thoughts, that I realized the subtle unease I'd felt wasn't just discomfort. It was a warning. And for the first time in our relationship, I understood that love alone couldn't shield me from manipulation. Not the overt kind, not the quiet, creeping kind that masked itself as friendship or nostalgia. The unease was a seed, and though I didn't yet know how it would grow, I knew it had taken root. I didn't sleep well that night, but I did something else. I opened my journal and started to map the truth. Not to accuse, not to punish, but to illuminate, to see clearly. Tomorrow, I thought, I will see him differently. I will not let this pass without acknowledgement. The photo notifications blinked silently in the dark. Mia's latest story floated across the screen, innocuous to anyone else, but to me, it was the beginning of understanding. And that understanding was terrifying. The days after my first confrontation with Nicholas blurred into a strange rhythm, half ordinary, half charged with unease. On the surface, everything was normal. He kissed me goodbye in the morning, poured coffee just the way I liked it, and laughed at my terrible puns. But underneath, a persistent tension pulsed, invisible yet insistent, like a low hum that never quite left the room. I couldn't stop noticing the posts. Each one from Nicholas with Mia seemed harmless at first glance. A smile, a caption, maybe a heart emoji, but the repetition gnawed at me. Late nights, early mornings, strategically timed when he knew I'd see them. My chest tightened when a new story appeared. Mia and Nicholas leaning close at a beach, sun setting behind them, a caption reading, "Some things never change." I told myself it wasn't jealousy. I'd met Mia, I knew her life didn't include Nicholas anymore, but that didn't change the sting of knowing he wanted her, and the world, to see them this way. The realization sank in slowly, like cold water seeping under skin. This wasn't occasional nostalgia. This was deliberate, a pattern of behavior designed to provoke, to unsettle. I found myself thinking about Nicholas constantly, not in the sweet, daydreamy way I used to, but in a calculating, uneasy way. When he left for work, I checked my phone compulsively, not to spy, not out of obsession, but to see if he had posted anything new. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, waiting for the next post to drop, bracing for the twist in my stomach I'd come to recognize as betrayal. And then came the second confrontation. It wasn't premeditated. I simply reached my limit one Thursday evening when I saw a story of them leaning together in a cafe, laughing over something only they understood. My voice shook, but I tried to remain calm. "Nicholas, we need to talk. These posts, they don't feel like friendship. They make me uncomfortable." He didn't even flinch. "Ella, seriously? I post memories. It's not about Mia. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I echoed, my jaw tight. "I'm not asking for the world. I'm asking for respect, for boundaries, for acknowledgement that this hurts me." His lips curled into a faint smile. "Boundaries? You mean controlling me. Your jealousy is exhausting. You're imagining things, and now you're trying to make me feel guilty. That's not fair." I felt the familiar twist of doubt in my stomach. Am I imagining this? Is it really manipulation, or am I too sensitive? But the cold logic of the timeline spoke louder than my swirling emotions. Photos posted late at night, captions flirty in a way only someone in the know could understand. This wasn't imagination, it was intentional. I didn't argue further. Instead, I retreated into observation. I began a subtle investigation of my own. Mia's life was meticulously public on Instagram. Couple milestones, birthday dinners, work check-ins, but no evidence of recent closeness with Nicholas. The gap was telling. Nicholas was curating a narrative, showcasing affection that existed only in selective memory. He was performing nostalgia, and I was the unintended audience. As I documented my findings, I began to notice patterns in Nicholas's reactions. Each time I raised a concern, he responded with calm dismissal, amusement, or subtle critique. "You're imagining it. You're being controlling. Your jealousy is your problem." The words were carefully chosen, designed to make me doubt myself. I knew this now because late at night, I would reread our conversations and see the thread of manipulation weaving through them. Cinematic moments began to feel charged with tension. I would sit by the window, city lights spilling across the hardwood floor, my phone in hand, heart racing as I scrolled through posts I shouldn't have to question. The air felt thick, the familiar apartment suddenly claustrophobic. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator seemed like a drumbeat counting down to some unspoken confrontation. I began to catalog the posts, dates, captions, emojis, even the subtle timing of when they appeared online. Each screenshot was a breadcrumb, each memory a piece of a puzzle that formed a disturbing image. It wasn't jealousy, I realized. It was survival. I needed to know the truth before it ate me alive. Late at night, I wrote in my journal, flashlight under the covers, whispering to myself like a confession. I can't control him. I can't even control how this makes me feel, but I can control what I do about it. I have to protect myself. The words felt like armor, each letter a small act of defiance against the slow erosion of my confidence. But even with the evidence mounting, the hardest part was the doubt that lingered between us. Nicholas's dismissal was like a shadow that followed me everywhere, a subtle gaslight that made me question if I was being irrational. He hadn't crossed any line I could prove definitively. There were no explicit messages, no secret meetings, just public posts, curated affection, and the sting of repeated disregard for my feelings. The tension built gradually, unspoken but undeniable. Even when he held me in his arms, I felt the faint chill of unease. It was a paradox, intimacy that comforted, alongside a constant reminder that his priorities, or at least his displays, were misaligned with my emotional safety. One night, staring at the glow of his latest post, I realized the truth. I couldn't wait for him to change. I had to see clearly for myself. And so, I made a decision. I would continue documenting, continue observing, and prepare. I didn't yet know how far I would go, but I knew the next step would require courage. The courage to confront the pattern I could no longer ignore. And beneath it all, a quiet determination settled into my chest, heavier than fear, firmer than doubt. I will not let myself be erased. Not by memory, not by manipulation, not by him. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the city outside, and I closed my laptop, a small sense of control returning. I felt fragile and strong all at once, perched at the edge of a realization that would change everything. Tomorrow, I thought, I will see Nicholas differently. I will no longer let appearances dictate my worth. I will act, and I will not back down. The evidence was laid out in front of me like a map. Each post and caption a sign pointing toward a truth I could no longer ignore. I had spent days quietly cataloging everything, screenshots, timestamps, captions, and the subtle patterns that Nicholas thought were invisible. I wasn't doing this to accuse or humiliate him. I was doing it to see clearly, to arm myself with clarity before speaking. Sitting at the kitchen table late at night, the glow of my laptop illuminating the furrow in my brow, I ran a hand through my hair. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I told myself I had nothing to fear, but my heart raced anyway. Each post from Nicholas felt like a tick of a clock counting down to the confrontation I knew was inevitable. When Nicholas walked in later that evening, casual and unaware, I felt a surge of resolve. "Nicholas, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm but steady. He paused, brow raised. "About what?" he asked, feigning curiosity. I opened my laptop and tilted it toward him. "About this," I said. "All of this." Screenshots of his latest posts, timestamps, captions, I laid them out with deliberate precision. It's not jealousy, it's respect, it's boundaries, and it's about how your actions affect me. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Ella, you're twisting everything. These are just memories. They're innocent. Why are you making a problem out of nothing?" I swallowed the knot in my throat and met his eyes. "It isn't nothing. It's every post, every flirty comment, every carefully timed story. It's consistent. And whether you intend it or not, it hurts me." For a moment, silence hung between us, like a fragile thread. Then he spoke, calm but with a trace of amusement. "You're overreacting. Your mind makes it worse. I post what I post. It's not about Mia, it's your insecurity talking." I felt the familiar tug of doubt, the old gaslight trying to twist my perception. But I had spent nights cataloging, comparing, observing. I could see through it now. This is manipulation, I realized. Not because he is evil, but because he has been dismissing my feelings repeatedly, framing them as irrational. I'm not insecure, I said, voice firmer. I'm asserting my boundaries. You may call it jealousy, dismiss it as insecurity, but the effect is the same. I feel disrespected, I feel disregarded, and I won't ignore it anymore. His brow furrowed, and I saw the first flicker of hesitation. But his next words were immediate, defensive. Fine, but you'll learn how controlling you are. You're making mountains out of molehills. I didn't flinch. This isn't about control, it's about respect. If you can't respect me, then we have a problem, and I will act accordingly. My hands were steady on the table, my voice quiet but unwavering. For the first time, I wasn't pleading or asking, I was stating. The room felt charged, almost electric, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I imagined all the late-night posts, the subtle nostalgia, the careful curation meant to provoke a reaction. All of it was laid bare now. The evidence was clear, the pattern undeniable, and I could finally see Nicholas in full relief. A man who didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand, the consequences of his behavior on someone he claimed to love. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the screen's glow fade into the dim lamplight. I'm not asking you to stop caring about the past. I'm asking you to respect me in the present. If that's too much, then we have to reconsider everything. He said nothing for a long moment, and I held my breath. Then he nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. Okay, I get it. I'll think about it. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the subtle resistance, the trace of blame still directed at me. I knew the battle wasn't over. Manipulation wasn't always loud. It often whispered, nested in small gestures, in the shifting of blame, in the framing of your emotions as irrational. That night, I lay in bed next to him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. My own chest was calm, a strange mix of relief and vigilance. I had spoken my truth. I had set boundaries. I had acted with intelligence and composure, and yet I knew the slow burn challenge was only beginning. I pulled out my journal once more and wrote under the faint glow of the bedside lamp. This is about self-respect. This is about seeing clearly. I won't let subtle manipulation erode my boundaries. I won't let my voice be silenced by dismissal disguised as affection. It was a turning point, a subtle victory, not public, not dramatic, but deeply personal. I felt the weight of awareness settle into my chest, firm and steady. I could not control Nicholas. I could not predict his next move, but I could control myself, and that was power enough. The next morning, the city hummed with life outside our window. I made coffee, sipped slowly, and watched the sunlight scatter across the kitchen floor. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Not entirely free of worry, not entirely free of tension, but aware, grounded, prepared. I had seen the pattern, I had named it, and I had chosen to stand in my own truth, even if the world, or Nicholas, tried to tell me otherwise. The evidence, the screenshots, the cataloged posts, they were not weapons, but shields, and with them, I could face the next steps with clarity, courage, and the knowledge that I was no longer invisible in my own life. The days after the confrontation were strange. Nicholas's posts slowed, though not entirely disappeared. Occasionally, a lingering story would appear, a beach sunset, a casual coffee shot, but the captions were neutral, stripped of the affectionate nostalgia that had unsettled me. It was as if he was testing the waters, trying to comply while keeping his private thrills just out of reach. I watched, quietly, carefully. Each post was a small test, and each time I reminded myself my priority wasn't to punish him, it was to protect myself. For weeks I maintained my documentation, noting subtleties, the timing of his posts, the captions, the subtle tones of distance or intimacy. It wasn't obsession, it was vigilance. My gut had been right, and I wasn't going to ignore it again. And yet, in the quiet moments, walking through the city park, watching the sunlight fracture through autumn leaves, I felt something new. Not peace, exactly, but clarity. I could separate my love for Nicholas from the damage his behavior had caused. I could hold both truths simultaneously, that I had loved him deeply, and that love alone was not enough to protect my emotional safety. I considered my choices. I could continue the relationship, maintaining strict boundaries, and observing whether Nicholas would genuinely respect them, or I could leave, preserving my self-respect and refusing to tolerate ongoing subtle manipulation. I weighed the months of repeated dismissals, of gaslighting disguised as affection, and I felt the weight of my own agency settle into my chest. I spoke to myself quietly that evening, in the dim glow of my living room, voice barely audible. I cannot control him. I cannot dictate his behavior. I can only control myself. And me is someone who deserves honesty, respect, and boundaries. The decision crystallized. I would no longer compromise my sense of worth. If Nicholas could not meet me as an equal, if he continued to prioritize nostalgia over respect, I would walk away. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would simply honor my truth. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic exit, no slammed doors or shouting matches. It was subtler, quieter, more profound. A long, deliberate exhale. I placed my phone on the counter, the latest post from Nicholas glowing softly on the screen. A story of a sunset with Mia, perfectly innocent to anyone else, but a reminder to me of what had been and what I refused to accept. I left the apartment the next morning, walking through the city streets as sunlight spilled over the pavement, bathing everything in a golden hue. Each step felt lighter, freer, more deliberate. The world was moving around me, indifferent yet beautiful, and for the first time, I felt aligned with myself. I thought about the past months, the quiet gaslighting, the subtle manipulations, the emotional tests, and I allowed myself a moment of sadness. Not anger, not regret, but acknowledgement. I loved deeply, I trusted, I was patient, and still, I see clearly now. The sun hit the leaves in brilliant color, scattering light across my path. I breathed in deeply, feeling the city pulse around me, the rhythm of life moving forward. I knew that vigilance would always be a part of me, a soft awareness of my own boundaries, but it was no longer fear, it was power. Later, I shared a subtle truth with a friend, a trusted confidant, showing only what was necessary. The posts, the captions, the repeated patterns, not to incite drama, not to shame, but to validate my own experience and to remind myself that I had acted, observed, and protected my heart. I was no longer passive in my own story. And in that quiet observation, I realized something else. Nicholas's choices were his own. I could no longer control them, nor was it my duty to correct his behavior. My responsibility was to myself, to honor my emotions, my boundaries, and my self-respect. For the first time in months, scrolling through social media no longer made my stomach twist. I could look at a screen, a post, a story, and simply observe, detached but aware. I didn't need to intervene. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth, as always, spoke for itself. I walked past a cafe, sunlight catching the window pane, and for a brief moment, I imagined myself years from now, looking back on this chapter. I smiled faintly, knowing that what I had gained wasn't revenge, and it wasn't validation from others. It was clarity, it was strength, it was the quiet triumph of self-respect. The glow of Nicholas's latest post lingered in my mind, a reminder, a small pulse of unresolved tension. But it no longer held power over me. I was grounded, I was free, and I had learned the most essential truth. Emotional manipulation can be subtle, insidious, and beautifully disguised, but awareness, courage, and boundaries are stronger. I walked on, the city alive around me, each step a reaffirmation of myself. I had seen clearly, acted decisively, and honored my heart, and in that, I felt the slow, steady pulse of liberation, the quiet joy of choosing oneself above all else. I had survived, I had witnessed the truth, and I would never let my voice be silenced again.